Have you ever walked down the stairs into your basement or popped the latch on an old military footlocker in the garage and been immediately hit by that unmistakable, heavy, musty odor? We usually just shrug our shoulders and call it the smell of the basement or the scent of old age. We light a pine-scented candle, spray some aerosol air freshener, and pretend the problem is solved. But what if I told you that familiar, nostalgic smell is not just stagnant air? What if I told you it is the scent of your prized possessions? Your vintage leather jackets, your carefully stored baseball cards, your family photo albums, being quietly, systematically eaten alive? More importantly, what if the permanent solution to stop this silent destruction dead in its tracks does not require a bulky, buzzing $200 machine? What if it does not require an extension cord, a spinning fan, or a drain hose? What if the ultimate fix is a simple $4 secret that the disposable household products industry is desperately hoping you never figure out? Welcome. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the $4 dry trick that dehumidifies any room forever with absolutely zero power needed. We're going to explore the fascinating chemistry behind it, show you how to build a lifetime moisture trap using things you probably have in your kitchen, and reveal the hidden trick to completely regenerate it so you never have to buy another plastic tub of moisture absorber again. But before we get to the cure, we have to understand the disease. Think about what humidity is actually doing to the enclosed spaces in your home. The basement that always feels just a little too clammy. The hall closet where your good leather boots keep developing that fuzzy green mold right along the stitching. The outdoor storage unit where your sturdy cardboard boxes turn soft, sagging like wet newspaper. Or that beautiful vacation cabin RV or boat you lock up at the end of the season, only to open it months later and find everything inside smelling like the interior of a damp canvas tent from a 1970s Boy Scout jamboree. My friends, that is not a cleaning problem. You cannot scrub your way out of it with bleach. That is a chemistry problem. When excess moisture is trapped in enclosed air, it behaves like a stealthy trespasser. As the temperature drops, that vapor condenses on cooler surfaces. It penetrates deep into wood fibers, aggressively oxidizes exposed metal, and degrades leather, fabric, paper, and sensitive electronic components over time. It is a slow-motion demolition, and waiting in the wings are mold spores. They are always present, floating in the air, just waiting for the right conditions to strike. The Environmental Protection Agency clearly recommends keeping our indoor relative humidity between 30 and 50%. But here is the terrifying part. Once that humidity creeps above 60%, mold begins to actively colonize and multiply on your surfaces within 24 to 48 hours. Imagine it like rust on the quarter panel of a classic 1969 muscle car. By the time you actually see the rust bubbling up through the paint, the invisible damage underneath is already done. Moisture in your home operates the exact same way. You have to intercept the moisture from the air before it ever settles. Did you know? Speaking of fighting invisible enemies, the United States military learned a harsh lesson about ambient moisture during the Second World War and the early days of the Cold War. When the military began mothballing its massive fleet of battleships and aircraft for the National Defense Reserve Fleet, they realized that salt spray and ocean humidity would turn these multi-million-dollar steel leviathans into floating rust buckets within a few short years. Their solution? They sealed the ships tightly and utilized massive industrial-scale desiccants to draw the moisture completely out of the interior air. They knew back in the 1940s, what we often forget today. If you control the humidity, you control the preservation of history. So, how do we control it in our own homes? For decades, the cleaning aisle at your local hardware store has offered a highly profitable, heavily marketed answer. You have almost certainly seen it. It usually comes in a neat little plastic tub with a slotted lid containing a handful of white crystals and a collection reservoir underneath. It is famously sold under brand names like Damperid. It does exactly what it promises. It pulls moisture out of the air in your closets, bathrooms, and basements. It works beautifully. But here's the catch. It costs between $12 and $18 per tub. You set it in the corner, wait for the white crystals to dissolve into a puddle of murky liquid, and then, just as the manufacturer intended, you throw the whole plastic tub into the garbage, drive back to the hardware store, and buy another one. It is a brilliant business model. It is the equivalent of a mechanic charging you premium labor rates every single month just to top off your windshield washer fluid. Because the crystals inside that expensive plastic tub are not some patented high-tech miracle of modern science. They are calcium chloride. So what exactly is the secret ingredient inside those expensive disposable plastic tubs? It is an inorganic salt known as calcium chloride. And here's the kicker. You can pick up a massive bag of this exact same compound at almost any pool supply store, local hardware shop, or farm supply outlet for about $4. This is not some rare, exotic mineral mined from the depths of a remote volcano. This is the hard-working, blue-collar backbone of American industry. It is the exact same compound city crews use to melt dangerous ice off the highways during a brutal Midwestern winter. It is the same ingredient used to condition agricultural soil, and it is even used in food preservation. The entire business model of those brand name moisture absorbers is painfully simple. They buy massive industrial quantities of cheap calcium chloride, repackage a few handfuls into a branded plastic tub with a built-in catch basin, and sell it back to you for 3 to 4 times the cost of the raw material. It is a brilliant trick of retail psychology. It is like buying a single shiny screw in a plastic blister pack at the checkout counter for $2 when a whole cardboard box of the exact same screws sits just one aisle over for pennies apiece. They designed it as a product you throw away and replace month after month. And in doing so, they conveniently leave out the one crucial detail that changes the entire equation. The one detail that makes this a one-time purchase instead of a recurring subscription fee for the rest of your life. But before we get to that ultimate money-saving secret, we need to understand why this humble salt is so incredibly powerful. Why does it work so well that it completely surprises people the first time they see it in action? In the world of chemistry, calcium chloride is classified as a hygroscopic salt. In plain English, that means it is a compound with an extremely strong, almost magnetic chemical affinity for water molecules. When you expose these dry, white crystals to humid air, an invisible, microscopic battle begins. The calcium and chloride ions resting on the surface of the crystals reach out and grab water vapor molecules directly out of the surrounding air, pulling them in and binding them tight. Imagine a heavy-duty shop vacuum quietly running in the corner of your room, but instead of pulling in sawdust, it is relentlessly sucking the moisture right out of the atmosphere. And it does not stop. This process continues relentlessly until the partial pressure of water within the salt solution perfectly matches the partial pressure of the air around it. Simply put, the crystals will keep pulling and pulling until they reach a state of perfect equilibrium with the room. But here is where the science gets truly fascinating. At high humidity levels, these crystals absorb so much ambient water that they literally drown themselves in it. They undergo a chemical process called deliquescence. They absorb and absorb and absorb until the solid structure surrenders, dissolving into a heavy, clear liquid known as a brine. The brine then drips harmlessly down into whatever collection container you have placed beneath it. Now, you might be thinking about those little paper packets of silica gel, the ones you find stuffed into new shoeboxes or at the bottom of a bag of beef jerky. Silica gel is fine for keeping a pair of loafers dry during shipping. Under normal conditions, silica gel can typically absorb 10 to 30% of its own weight in water. But calcium chloride is in an entirely different weight class. It is the heavyweight champion of moisture control. Documented chemistry proves that calcium chloride can absorb moisture up to an astonishing 6 times its own weight. That is not an inflated marketing number meant to sell you something. That is a cold, hard, scientific fact. When it comes to high humidity environments, silica gel brings a garden hose to a raging fire, while calcium chloride brings a fleet of fire trucks. Did you know? Long before we were using it to keep our basements dry, calcium chloride was a familiar friend to anyone who grew up with a pantry full of home-canned goods. If you remember the 1960s and 70s, you might remember your mother or grandmother spending late summer days boiling mason jars to preserve the garden harvest. Calcium chloride was, and still is, the secret ingredient used in commercial and home canning to keep tomatoes and pickles perfectly crisp and firm. It interacts with the natural pectin in the fruit, reinforcing the cellular structure so your preserved vegetables do not turn into mush over the long winter. It is just another example of this incredible compound quietly working behind the scenes in our everyday lives. And the best part? Unlike a mechanical dehumidifier, calcium chloride requires zero energy input whatsoever. There is no grinding compressor to keep you awake. There is no humming fan. There is no need to stretch a hazardous extension cord across a damp floor. You place it in a space, and it works silently, constantly, day and night, for as long as there is excess moisture in the air. So, how do we harness this chemical powerhouse at home for just $4? Let us head into the kitchen, or perhaps out to your workbench. Building this permanent passive moisture trap is so incredibly straightforward it almost feels like cheating. You do not need an engineering degree. You do not need any specialized tools. You need exactly 2 things. First, grab your $4 bag of calcium chloride. Remember, when you are standing in the aisle at the farm supply or hardware store, you want to buy the pellet or flake form. You absolutely do not want the fine powder, and you will see why in just a moment. Second, you need a simple 2-piece container system. Something that allows the solid, dry crystals to sit suspended in the air, while providing a catch basin for the heavy liquid to drain into. The absolute simplest, most foolproof version of this is something you probably already have, sitting in a kitchen cabinet right now. A standard, clean, plastic kitchen colander resting inside a solid mixing bowl of roughly the same width. Think of the mechanics like a classic old-school drip coffee maker or traditional stovetop double boiler. Here is the entire highly technical assembly process. You simply take your plastic colander, place it securely inside the bowl, and fill the bottom of the colander with 2 to 3 inches of your calcium chloride pellets. That is it. Put your bag away because you are completely finished. As those white pellets sit there, they go to work immediately, quietly drawing the humidity out of the room. As they reach their maximum capacity and undergo that fascinating process of deliquescence we talked about earlier, they slowly transform into a heavy liquid brine. Gravity naturally takes over, and that brine drips straight through the holes of the colander down into the solid bowl waiting patiently below. The dry crystals remaining on top just keep right on working, unbroken and uninterrupted, until every last pellet has dissolved. When the bottom bowl gets full of liquid, you simply carry it to the sink and empty it. There are no expensive filters to wash, no rubber belts to replace, and no yearly maintenance schedules to remember. Now, let us talk about your deployment strategy, because placement absolutely matters. If you are trying to protect a standard hall closet, a heavy steel gun safe, or small storage locker, a single one of these colander and bowl setups is going to handle the job perfectly. But what if you are defending a larger, wide open space like an unfinished basement or an expansive 2-car garage? This is where we have to respect the laws of physics. Remember, our homemade moisture trap is a passive system. It does not have a motorized, spinning fan aggressively pulling air across the room. It only interacts with the atmosphere immediately surrounding it. So you cannot just drop one single bowl in the center of a massive basement and expect a miracle. You need to think tactically. Think of it like setting up a defensive perimeter around a campsite. You want to place multiple units stationed around the outer edges of the room, tucked into the corners. A good rule of thumb is to imagine each bowl effectively protecting a circular radius of about 3 to 5 feet. Beyond that invisible boundary, the moisture pulling effect starts to quickly diminish. If you live in an exceptionally humid climate, say a swampy July afternoon down in the deep south, and you are trying to keep a massive basement completely dry, these passive traps work best as loyal sidekicks to a heavy-duty, powered dehumidifier rather than a total replacement. But for those tight, closed-up spaces, your seasonal closets, your rented storage units, your docked boat, or that quiet hunting cabin out in the woods, these simple $4 setups are a completely bulletproof standalone solution. Did you know? Speaking of seasonal storage, when the iconic Silver Bullet Airstream trailers hit their golden age of popularity across America in the 1960s and 70s, ambient moisture was one of the biggest enemies of the Great American Road Trip. When families would park their gleaming aluminum homes on wheels for the winter, the sharp temperature drops would cause severe interior condensation, often ruining the beautiful wood paneling and upholstery inside. Savvy veteran RV owners quickly learned a brilliant trick. They would place open containers of rock salt or early agricultural desiccants inside the cabin before locking the door until spring. They were practicing this exact same chemical principle decades before expensive branded moisture absorbers ever hit the retail market. Now, everything we have talked about so far is great for saving money on the initial purchase. But here is the part that nobody who sells disposable moisture absorbers will ever put on their packaging. When your calcium chloride crystals have fully dissolved into brine and there is nothing left in your colander but clear liquid in the bowl beneath it. The job is not finished. When you look at this bowl of clear liquid, modern consumer culture has trained you to think of it as garbage. You have been taught to pour it down the drain and reach for your wallet to buy another plastic tub, but scientifically speaking, that is a massive mistake. The calcium chloride is absolutely still in this bowl. It has not been magically destroyed, and it has not been used up like a spent flashlight battery. Chemically, it is completely intact, 100% functional, and just waiting to be called back into action. It has simply absorbed all the physical water it can hold at room temperature. Think of it like a heavy-duty shop sponge that is completely saturated. You do not throw a good sponge away when it gets wet. You wring it out. Here is exactly how you wring out calcium chloride, using an appliance sitting right in your kitchen. By applying steady, sustained heat to this saturated brine, we can forcefully drive those trapped water molecules back out of the salt, restoring the compound to its original bone-dry active state. In the scientific world, this is called regeneration. In the real world, it is the single greatest money-saving trick in household maintenance. Here is the simple, step-by-step method. First, carefully pour the collected liquid brine from your plastic bowl into a shallow, oven-safe dish. A sturdy glass baking dish works perfectly for this. The exact kind of heavy glass casserole dish your family has probably used to bake the Thanksgiving green bean casserole since 1978. Next, preheat your kitchen oven. You want to set the temperature dial somewhere between 300 and 400 degrees Fahrenheit. For anyone watching who prefers the metric system, that is roughly 150 to 200 degrees Celsius. Carefully place the glass dish onto the center rack, close the oven door, and simply walk away for 1 to 3 hours. As the oven steadily heats the brine, the trapped water begins to turn into steam, evaporating and safely exiting through your oven exhaust vent. Slowly, the water vanishes, and what is left behind in the baking dish is nothing short of scientific magic. Pure, dry, reconstituted calcium chloride. It is completely reborn. Once it is fully baked dry, take the dish out, let it cool completely to room temperature, and then store those revived crystals in a tightly sealed, airtight jar until you need them again. When your closet or your garage gets damp, just pour them right back into your plastic colander. You have just taken the exact same $4 worth of raw material and put it back on the payroll. And the best part? If you do it correctly, you're not degrading the chemical at all. That exact same batch of salt can be regenerated and reused many, many times. Did you know? This concept of regenerating and reusing materials taps right into a classic piece of American history. During the harsh years of the Great Depression in the 1930s, Americans lived by a strict, proud motto: use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. Families reused everything from cotton flour sacks to make clothing, to save bacon grease for making homemade soap. Over the last few decades, in the era of cheap plastics and one-click overnight deliveries, we lost a lot of that resilient mindset. But by learning to regenerate this simple salt, we are not just saving a few dollars. We are reconnecting with that classic, self-reliant American spirit. Now, before you fire up the oven, there are 3 very important rules of the road you need to follow to do this safely and effectively. We do not cut corners on this channel. First, let us talk about ventilation. As all that water steadily evaporates from the brine inside your oven, that moisture has to go somewhere. It will travel straight into your kitchen air. Now, this is not dangerous. You are essentially just boiling salt water, so it produces 0 toxic fumes. But think about it. If you do not open a window or turn on your overhead exhaust hood, you are just moving the moisture problem from your damp basement straight into your kitchen. So flip that exhaust fan on. Second, always use an oven-safe glass container for this process. Do not use anything metal. While an aluminum baking sheet might seem convenient, repeatedly heating concentrated salt water on bare metal will cause a corrosive chemical reaction over time, eventually pitting and ruining your favorite cookie sheet. Stick to heavy glass. Third, and perhaps most importantly, do not try to rush the process by cranking up the heat. I know it is tempting to turn the oven dial to 500 degrees Fahrenheit just to get it done faster, but resist that urge. Pushing the temperature significantly higher than 400 degrees Fahrenheit risks melting or permanently altering the chemical structure of the calcium chloride. Treat it exactly like smoking a good Texas brisket. Low, slow, and with plenty of discipline. Stay faithfully in that 300 to 400 degree range for a clean, complete regeneration. Now, my friends, as you know, this channel is built on one core foundation: absolute honesty. We do not do clickbait, and we do not sell miracles. So, before you rush out to buy a 40-pound bag of calcium chloride, we need to talk about 2 very real practical limitations of the system. You need to know exactly when to use this tool and when to call in the heavy cavalry. First and foremost, calcium chloride is the ultimate champion for passive dehumidification in enclosed or semi-enclosed spaces and for managing moderate to high humidity environments. But it is absolutely not a magic wand for a severely water-damaged space or a basement with active water intrusion. If your basement walls are visibly wet to the touch, if water is actively weeping through your foundation after a heavy spring downpour, or if you're dealing with the messy aftermath of a ruptured pipe, a bowl of salt is not going to save you. In those serious situations, you are dealing with hundreds of gallons of liquid. You absolutely need a heavy-duty, commercial-grade mechanical dehumidifier equipped with a built-in condensate pump and serious water-moving capacity. Calcium chloride is the perfect tool for preventing the conditions that lead to mold and musty odors. It is not a remedy for an active flood. Second, because we are dealing with a concentrated salt, you must handle it with basic common-sense care. Calcium chloride will cause immediate eye irritation if you accidentally rub your face with dusty hands, and it can dry out or irritate your skin if you handle the raw flakes with bare hands for a prolonged period. Keep it safely out of reach of curious grandchildren and family pets. Furthermore, never apply the dry crystals or the liquid brine directly to bare metal or fine leather surfaces. The clear brine the system produces is highly corrosive to metals over time. When you are ready to dispose of any excess saturated brine, simply pour it straight down the bathroom or utility drain while running plenty of tap water. The running water safely dilutes the salt solution down to a completely harmless level instantly. These are straightforward, simple precautions. And they are the exact same rules that apply to the heavy rock salt you throw on your driveway every winter. When you take a step back and look at the bigger picture, the numbers are truly eye-opening. The global dehumidifier market was officially valued at a staggering $4 billion in 2023, and it has been growing steadily every single year since. Damp-Rid alone, just one single brand selling these little plastic tubs, generates tens of millions of dollars in annual retail sales. Think about that for a moment. They are built on a multi-million-dollar empire, selling a raw material that has been sitting quietly on the bottom shelf of your local hardware store for decades, available for a tiny fraction of the price. The disposable format is not a scientific necessity. It is a carefully engineered business model. And the molded plastic tub, the bright branding, the single-use design, all of it exists for the sole purpose of making you throw away a valuable compound that was always fully capable of being regenerated and reused right in your own kitchen. The chemistry did not change. The mineral did not change. The only thing that changed today is whether you know you can put it in the oven. Now you know the secret. And once you know the science, you can never be fooled by the marketing again. Before we wrap up today, let us dive into our special Did You Know archive for a couple more fascinating facts about how this humble compound has shaped our history. Did you know that calcium chloride actually played a vital, life-saving role in the construction of the American interstate highway system back in the 1950s? When President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, engineers faced a massive problem: how to quickly stabilize the dirt roads and sub-bases before pouring millions of tons of concrete. They discovered that treating the dry soil with calcium chloride kept the ground perfectly compacted and damp, preventing the soil from shifting and preventing dangerous dust storms that blinded construction crews. It is literally the invisible glue that holds some of our country's most iconic highways together. And for a quick practical tip you can use today, if you happen to own a classic car, a vintage camper, or even a collection of old power tools out in the shed, you can use this exact $4 trick to create custom moisture absorber satchels. Simply pour a cup of your calcium chloride pellets into an old, clean tube sock, tie a secure knot at the top, and place the sock inside an empty plastic gallon milk jug with the top cut off. Place it on the floorboard of your classic car during winter storage. It will keep the interior cabin smelling fresh, protect your dashboard from cracking, and prevent your chrome trim from pitting. When the sock stops feeling firm and the jug fills with liquid, just carry it to the kitchen and follow our oven baking guide. I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me today. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the practical science of everyday life, please hit that thumbs up button. I would love to hear from you down in the comments section. What is the most unusual item you're currently trying to protect from moisture in your home? Are you defending a collection of vintage vinyl records, an old wood workshop, or a box of family history? Or perhaps you have your own old school maintenance trick passed down from your parents. Share your stories below. I read as many of them as I can. Take care of your home, stay independent, and I will see you in the next one.